Yeah,
whatever.
let's
Hi,
do that. Let's
everybody.
leave it.
Yeah,
Okay.
that minimizes moving parts of the system. Welcome, everybody, on this glorious summer night. I just waded in the Hudson, so I'm pretty mellow. Please go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat and say anything you want to say about your interest in this topic. Recognizing that it is the chat. There's 66 people signed up, so we'll give it a little time for folks to land. Welcome, early birds. Welcome, on time people. Feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat, and we'll give it a few minutes because we have 62 people the last I noticed, or 66 or something. We could stand to have a livelier chat. If anyone else wants to say what brings them here, introduce yourself, your affiliations, whatever.
Okay, chat's getting fun.
I knew it would. I know
Yeah.
some of the people in this crowd.
Yeah.
So welcome everybody. I'm Melissa Everett. I'm Executive Director of Sustainable Hudson Valley, and we have been mobilizing people power in support of the clean energy transition since way back when we did a 3-year Solarize program, opening up the solar marketplace in 2015 to 18, I think. So this is a renewed commitment as we embark on a 2-year project to provide education about solar and battery storage and just what's going on with the transformation of our energy system. We are firm believers that renewable energy and storage are what will drive our prices down and are maturing rapidly as technologies. We are also firm believers that this is only going to work if the transition is community driven and not developer driven and not politics driven. And that is the main dynamic behind our work. Um, we are blessed with a youthful workforce that is into this stuff. And um, Kiara Carmen, our communications associate, is just finishing up her capstone in the master's program at Bard. I spoke to her class last year and she walked up and said, "Can I be your intern?" And she is now on our staff and she has been delving into battery storage technology and the politics and the communications issues as well. So we are blessed to have her moderating this evening, and I'll hand it to Kiara in a second. I do want to acknowledge that we are also blessed with a really rich network of smart people who care. And through that network, met Greg Galuccio. And I'm starting to think of our kind of history as BG and AG, before Greg and after Greg, because he has so helped us to frame the issue and communicate in simple and yet complex enough language. So um, we will go for about 45 to 50 minutes. We've got a lot of content for you. We promised you an in-depth, technical, thoroughly reviewed briefing. We've scheduled this for an hour and a half session, and we'll hang as long as anybody wants to hang. We really want to create a space for thoughtful, constructive dialogue. If you're unconstructive, I'll toss you out. But there's a lot of space to ask questions, float theories, and generally really interact with this content and with Kiara and Greg. So with that, take it away, Kiara.
Yes. Hi, I'm Kiara. Um, Tonight, Greg Lucio, our wonderful presenter who I've been working on this curriculum with, will be presenting, giving an overview of solar and how batteries and the grid all work together and how that impacts your electric bill. And then we'll be deep diving into battery technologies and some of the considerations for municipalities. There is an appendix to this, so we will be sending out slides to people that have registered tonight, as well as sending out a recording of this session on Monday as well. And so there is some more information that we don't have time to delve into, particularly around the permitting process and what that looks like, and some of the developer processes for what they do pre-permitting. And so that information is at the end of the slide deck that you guys will be receiving on Monday. Greg Lucio, our wonderful presenter, he has 43 years of experience as an electrical engineer, and he also worked at Underwriters Laboratories for 21 years. So I think that's it. Greg, take it away.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I also want to thank Kiara for the incredible amount of work she did helping put this together. It was quite the task, and I think we have a good presentation. I'm going to start by introducing myself, and I wish we could have a session where a live session with all of you in it in a live room, because I love to get feedback in real time. But I will try and answer all of your questions as they come along, and we will push question and answer to later on. But if you want to put questions in the chat, please do that. We have a brief agenda, which I'm not going to really go through because we're just going to start off. What am I missing a slide? I'm missing a slide, Kiara. Where is the
Never mind.
UL slide? Okay.
Somehow that got moved or deleted, or I don't know what happened. I'm sorry about that, Greg.
No problem. So what I was going to show you is a picture of a pretty nasty fire that occurred back in 1893. And it was a fire that occurred at the 1893 World's Fair. And it was in the building that housed the first exhibit put together by Thomas Edison of light bulbs. And during that exhibit, or the entire building caught fire and burned down. 17 people were killed. And as you can imagine, the reaction from the public was swift and strong. And I'm sure that a great many people in society thought, we don't want any part of this. We don't want any part of light bulbs. We don't want any part of electricity. And it turns out, after investigation, it was not the light bulbs that burned the building down. It was the electrical distribution system that was connected to the light bulbs that caused the fire. But that's not what we did. The world would have been a much different place if we had reacted and said, well, don't bring electric appliances anywhere near us. They're horrible. And that's a natural and a rational reaction. So I don't fault anyone for feeling that way. But what we really did in this case was we went and hired an engineer named William Henry Merrill, very smart engineer, who came along and did a forensic study of the fire. And what he was asked to do, and what he actually did do, was come back with a series of recommendations and building standards that said, if you want to deploy electricity without causing undue risk to the public, these are the steps you must follow, and these are the engineering practices you must follow. And the rest is history. And he formed Underwriters Laboratories, which is a safety testing organization that I worked for 21 years. And one of the big things that Underwriters Laboratories does is it writes safety codes and standards. So I was involved in doing that as well. As a matter of fact, when the first lithium batteries came out in 1991, they were being put into telephone answering machines and other small electric devices. We immediately found out that those little guys like to catch fire. And then we designed engineering standards showing how to keep them from catching fire. We do know how to do it. So we want to spend the rest of our time showing your knowledge, getting your knowledge and understanding of energy storage systems, what they are, how they work, providing some data and some perspective, and help you support decision-making in your communities. I'm going to tell you now that, after I left Underwriters Laboratories, I had 21 years there. I went into the manufacturing field and designed energy efficient products. I have a passion for energy efficiency and renewable energy. And so I am not an expert in utility scale BESS systems, but I know enough to be dangerous. So I'll be bringing them in at, say, a 30,000 foot level and getting all of us to be able to think about them, at least from the way engineers think about safety. I'm not here to advocate for or against any particular BESS system. I know that there's a rather large system being proposed in Ulster County, and I do not have enough information to form an opinion about whether that's a good idea or not. I do very much think that BESS systems ultimately are a necessity and will be the one thing that actually brings us closer to being able to deal with the energy demand situations that we face in today's society, which are unique. We are really in a unique situation. So let me start by saying, what am I talking about when I say BESS? And when I use the term just here and there throughout the presentation, I will be mostly referring to utility scale battery systems. One of the things I do take a little bit of exception to is people calling this experimental technology. I mean, I'm 68 years old, and I learned when I was 4 years old what a battery was when I realized that I had to put it into some of my toys to make them work. So we all know what batteries are. They are not experimental technology, and lithium batteries in particular have been around since on a commercial level since 1991. What I'm talking about that is a little bit novel and has just started to become deployed somewhere around 2008 are utility scale BESS systems. These are battery systems, and they look like those boxes I'm showing you in the picture there. They're large, they look like large metal storage containers because that's what they are. And they're full of batteries. They capture and store energy at a level that is able to supply power to perhaps a small community or even larger. And we'll talk about how big these can get. We'll talk about relative sizes and things like that. These generally use lithium batteries right now. Almost all of them that are out there use lithium batteries, but right on the horizon, probably within the next year or two, we're going to see a couple of more technologies coming through. One will be sodium-based batteries, which actually are probably environmentally friendlier than lithium. And they're a little bit heavier, but they can produce and store as much energy as the lithium batteries. And they are just about ready for prime time. There are some of them already deployed. And after that, solid state technology is making great strides. I don't know where we are in terms of when we'll see those, but I think we'll see them right after the sodium. Okay, go on. So what is driving the growth of the demand in the electrical sector? And this is something where I'm going to ask that anyone who thinks about this, especially in terms of costs, why please don't like try to blame some entity, because it's really not one entity. A lot of people like to get online and say, well, it's this politician's fault, or it's this developer who only cares about money that's driving up all these problems and costs and everything else. But in reality, it's a number of things that we can identify that are not really tied to any entity. Our electrical grids are being stretched now. They are entering a chaotic state of either being over or under capacity, and we'll talk about what that means. And the thing I think that's going to get us out of the increasing hole that we're digging for ourselves here is clean energy, renewables, and energy storage combined together. Okay, so let's take a look at these one by one. Now, this graph on your right is probably the most important graph I'm going to show you all night. I have to sort of clean up my screen here for a second. That green line that says present capacity is the amount of electricity we are able to deliver in New York State. And it's the blue line underneath is the projected demand that we're going to see as we move forward from 2020 through 2026, 2030, and 2040. Now, of course, it's not entirely accurate because it is a projection, but most of the different sources that we check deliver projection lines that look somewhat like this. So what you can see from this grid actually is that we do have enough capacity to deliver the energy demands at the present time. But if you extend that line to the point where it actually intersects with the blue demand line, a lot of bad things start to happen. So we have three possible scenarios here. Either that green line continues on a complete straight path from where it is and intersects that blue line, and I'll explain what happens if we get to that unfortunate scenario. Or we increase our capacity so that it tracks along the blue line. That's the second possible scenario. I happen to think that will be difficult, possibly doable, but definitely difficult. And the third scenario is that we increase the green line as best we can, and we bend down the blue line as best we can. And ways that we bend down the blue line is we create contracts with big power users that say, well, for example, with the data centers, we're not going to draw as much electricity during the day, and we're going to reduce our loads by 5%, and then increase at night when there's capacity available, things like that. There's ways that we can help offset some of the demand using incentives and things like that with the users of the electricity. So my ideal scenario, and the one that I think most likely to be successful going forward, is the one where we bend that blue line down a little bit and we bend that green one up as best we can. So let's talk about the grid. I mentioned that the grid is under stress. There's actually, in the United States, there are three grids, and the three grids don't talk to each other. They are effectively isolated from each other. There's the reason that we first had two grids. We had the eastern grid, which is in the blue, and we had the western grid, which is yellow. And those two grids, there were technical reasons why it was difficult to connect those two grids. Those technical reasons are largely gone. We are able to surmount those technical problems and connect those two grids. And it actually would be of benefit for us to do that, but it's actually not going to happen anytime soon. The reason that Texas has its own grid is because they seceded. And they decided, we don't want to be subject to any kind of federal laws that have to do with regulating the grid and regulating grid costs and all this kind of stuff. And so we're going to just break off and be our own grid. I think they found quickly after that, especially when the temperatures in Texas dropped below what they could handle in a strange weather anomaly a couple of years ago, if you remember that, that they were unable to pull, as they normally would have, they were unable to pull energy from the larger grids above them because of that cutoff. And they found themselves in a situation where they could not supply electricity to the demand for an extended period of time. I think it was several weeks or longer. If you remember, what happened during that period in Texas was that their electricity prices went literally into the hundreds of dollars per kilowatt, and people were getting $2,000 and $3,000 and $4,000 electrical bills for several days worth of electricity. That's what can happen sometimes. But actually, Texas is going to be a really interesting group for us to look at as we move through this. New York State is one of the unique states in the country that operates its grid on a state level as opposed to a multi-state regional level. So we have for better or worse, we're able to dictate what gets connected to our grid, what doesn't, how much anyone can charge for electricity, who connects to our grid, and things like that. We have an organization. It's a nonprofit organization called NYISO that actually operates the grid. They don't operate the power plants. They simply operate the highway system, which is the grid, that allows the power that's connected to the grid to move throughout the state. And as you see, the title of my slide says it's a tale of two grids. And the reason for that is that you see that big fat artery up at the top of the grid. That is a high capacity 735 plus kilovolt line, I'm sorry, that can move power from Quebec Hydro down into New York State and then feed it out to different parts of the state. And up until recently, there was a log jam right in the center of the state. So this part of the state that I just highlighted was able to use mostly clean power from Quebec Hydro, whereas the lower part of the state, which uses the most power, was operating under much dirtier liquid gas and oil type plants. By the way, New York has eliminated all of its coal plants. So in many other states, we'll talk about what happens when supply can't meet demand and they turn on older power plants called peaker plants. We'll talk about that in a minute. A lot of other states are actually turning on old coal plants to meet that demand. We don't have any coal plants here. But we did spend several $billion, I think it was about $2 billion, to clear that artery in the center of the state and allow now hydropower to get downstate into Long Island and New York City, where it is really needed the most in terms of demand. That allows us to provide that quite a bit of power down to clean power downstate. But at some point, 10 to 15 years from now, that's still not going to be enough of an upgrade in the transmission lines, and we'll have to upgrade it again to be able to continue to push enough energy down from all the way upstate down to those downstate big users. Okay. Here's my graph again. I might be showing you this a few times. And what I want to say is this. Remember, I said that what we really want to do is bend the capacity line up so it always stays above the blue line. And what I'm showing you here is that if we were to deploy a liquid gas plant, if it were to be permitted today in 2026, that plant would not come online until, and I'm being nice here, until somewhere 2033, 2034. So where are we at 2033, 2034? We're way up there on the blue line. So between now and then, that plant is doing nothing for us. It's not even turned on yet, and we better hope everything goes well. If we were to say let's use nuclear, let's build a new nuclear plant or two or three, the first one after permitting and all of the approvals that something like that needs to go in, which could take 2 to 3 years, we're not going to see that plant honestly before 2040. I was being nice by putting it at 2038 or so. So while these are solutions that will increase our capacity to deliver power, they are not solutions that are going to get here in time. What is a solution that's going to get here in time? So it turns out that renewables, solar, wind, and as we'll see, storage, utility scale BESS, are the fastest deployable solutions that we have and the cleanest. So, and actually, it turns out they're also the cheapest. So there's a lot of wind in our sails if those are the types of energy that we are most interested in deploying as we try to meet our needs here. Now, this is how the utilities draw power onto the grid, and when there's a typical day going along and our demands are normal, we're at what we call base demand or baseline demand. What's happening is the grid is pulling the least expensive and hopefully cleanest forms of energy onto the grid, and those are solar, land-based wind. Ocean-based wind is more expensive than land-based wind, and probably more expensive than CC gas. I'll tell you what that is in a minute. And also, this is called combined cycle gas. The combined cycle gas is also relatively inexpensive compared to the others that were shown above that. So that's what they're pulling when we have baseline demand during the day. But as demand goes up, when solar power or wind power starts to drop off, when everybody comes home from work later on in the day and the demand starts to go up, they have to start pulling in some of these other sources. And these sources, while nuclear is not is clean, it's really expensive. Single cycle gas, not all gas is made the same. Okay, so we have older single cycle gas turbine plants that are still in operation in New York State. Those are 5 times less efficient than combined cycle gas. These are the newer, higher technology gas plants. They are much more efficient than single cycle gas. So, for example, if you needed, 1,000 cubic feet of liquid natural gas to provide a certain amount of energy, the single cycle gas plant would need 5,000 cubic feet of it. So it's quite a difference, and it's much dirtier. And on top of that, if we have to, we go and we start pulling oil and diesel. And I'm going to show you what that demand curve looks like in a minute. Now, one of the things I have to point out here about this is that we can't just switch from one to the other instantaneously. So if we know the demand is going up and that in about an hour, we're going to see a huge demand spike in the amount of electricity that the state is using, they will have to start turning these dirtier plants on 1 or 2 hours before. Sometimes some of the better ones can turn on 15 minutes before. But now you've got all this running at the same time. Any benefit you might be getting in terms of energy, of cost savings and clean energy down at the bottom there, it has gone away, even though it could be actually powering what we need right now. The other stuff kicks in and we're paying for it. And by the way, many of these top plants up here on the top of this grid are plants that should have been decommissioned and mothballed probably a decade ago. But in fact, we are paying for them to be staffed and kept running and maintained because of these peak demand periods that we face. By the way, this is the poor guy who has to sit and watch as the grid in every second of real time is deploying energy from here to there. Demand is changing, instantaneous call for more stuff. Somebody in a big, huge industrial plant somewhere turns on 500 machines. And now where are we going to get that energy from? Holy mackerel. I never want to be this guy. I don't want to be an air traffic controller, and I don't want to be this guy. It's a pretty hair-raising thing to do every single day. This is what's going on. So what happens? What happens if we can't control how the grid is being loaded? And now there's two possibilities. The grid can be under capacity. In other words, we don't have enough energy based on the demand, and that causes the grid to become what we call unstable, or we have too much. And this is known as the duck curve. I was originally going to put a picture of a duck superimposed over this, but our imaginations, I think, are good enough to see why we call this the duck curve. This is an actual graph of what happens in California when over several different years. And during the middle of the day, we're looking at 12 p.m. here, we see that what appears to be demand has gone way down. But in actuality, it's a bunch of solar generation, either rooftop solar or solar farms, that have kicked in because the sun is shining, and it's pumping electricity into the grid. And it may get to the point at certain points through the day where people are not using a lot of electricity, where the grid is getting too much energy. And what happens is the grid starts to, the frequency of the electricity in the grid starts to become unstable. And that, rather than get into technicalities for you, that wreaks havoc on our machines, our electrical devices in our machines. When those devices start to power down, everybody turns off their big industrial machines, gets in their cars, drives home, turns all their air conditioning on, the solar power goes away. Now we've got a big bunch of demand over on the right, and we are unable to actually provide enough power. What that results in is rolling blackouts and brownouts. And those are not just nuisances or inconveniences. Those are dangerous. Even brownouts, and I'll talk about why brownouts are dangerous in a moment. So if the light bulb hasn't gone off in your head yet as to what is really different and unusual about electrical power compared to other utilities and other products that need to be delivered, I'm gonna show you right now, and it is this. Number one, if you need to deliver water, for example, you can store the water that you will need for high demand periods in a reservoir and pull it when you need it. You can store it in a water tower and pull it when you need it. You don't have to manufacture water or go out and find it in real time, okay? Same for food, medical supplies, and other critical items, even gasoline, that you might need to make society work, right? We can manufacture those things in advance and then put them on a shelf or put them in a warehouse and then deliver them as the demand occurs. What we can't do with electricity is store it until now. And prior to that, and matter of fact, it's in 95 or to 99% true that the electricity that is powering the device you're watching me on right now is being run by a turbine somewhere, a turbine somewhere in real time in the state of New York, and being sent directly to your home, to the plug in your wall. It has to happen in real time. That thing has to be running. Okay, so imagine if we could store electricity rather than have to manufacture it when the demand hits. And that is where we're going to start to realize that utility scale battery storage is actually a game changer. It's a game changer. So we're going to try and, really understand the value of it. I love this graph. This is a graph of March 29th, 2026 in California. And March 29th, 2026 in California, what happened was they got the duck curve like they always do. And what you see in the yellow is solar energy taking over and basically supplying a great deal of the demand of the grid. So demand rate in that period is fairly low, and generation from renewables is really high. And then the purple area is the fun part. The purple area is when the sun goes down and the solar energy starts to go away. We're unable to generate any more solar when the sun goes down, but that purple represents battery storage being sipped and pulled from to meet the top end of that duck curve. Okay, and it manages to do that all the way out into a large part of the night. What happens if those batteries are not there is we're in this maroon area, which is basically coal. They are at that point, they are meeting the demand by running dirty, expensive, black lung coal fired plants. So if we can get that purple area all the way over and increase the BESS demand, the red goes away. That is really the goal. And not only does it save the environment. If you don't care about the environment, I'm sure you care about your electric bill. Your electric bill will be extremely reduced if compared to what would happen if we didn't have this. So I hope it's starting to become clear what storage, which is relatively new in terms of our capabilities here, is going to do for us. So, what are the drivers of all this demand? I'll try. It's very simple. Okay, the prices are being driven, number one, because LP gas prices are going up. Liquid natural gas prices are going up, and that's worldwide. That's not anything that Donald Trump or Kathy Hochul or anybody are doing. This is demand driven. There's some blips that those people could create if they enacted certain policies, but the long term demands are really the overriding factor. And what's driving the demand in order of importance or volume? It's overwhelmingly data centers, and right after that is a switch to heating electrification. That is large buildings mostly, but also residential, that is moving from oil or gas-based furnaces over to heat pumps and electric sources of heat. What that's also going to do is switch the current situation for grid managers from a high demand summer to a high demand winter. And finally, electric vehicles. So those three are the big drivers of where a lot of this energy is coming in the United States. Okay, in other places, it's just possibly a development of underdeveloped countries that's pushing up the demand. But demand in terms of cost is always global. It's not local. There's another driver, and that is maintenance and upgrade of aging infrastructure. The grid that we have, is many decades old. It's outdated. It's not new technology. And if we actually were to upgrade the grid in a large way, we could supply up to 30% more energy to the entire country without having to build another power plant. So that's something else that you'll see we'll be spending a lot of money on doing, upgrading the grid, because it is really needed. And then a lot of plants are retiring. Those plants have to be decommissioned, things like that. I'm going to talk briefly about solar now. And I realize I'm moving quickly, but we are going to run out of time if I don't push this. Solar, we know how it works. But large-scale solar development is what's coming along, and we do get pushback on this, and understandably so. People are concerned about large-scale solar, and there are some common community concerns and questions about it, which I'll go through fairly quickly. Farmland and/or natural habitat displacement. So if we're taking farmlands or natural habitats and building large solar farms on those, I happen to agree with this. I don't like the idea that large swaths of land are going to be taken away to willy-nilly just deploy large solar fields. But there are ways we can actually deploy these onto our rural areas without the disruption that people are concerned about. One of them is agrivoltaics, where farming coexists with the solar and actually is helped by the solar. Um, Sometimes you hear, oh, solar doesn't work without subsidies. The numbers don't work. That's my favorite one because um, number one, solar is absolutely the cheapest form of energy right now that we can deploy and use. And number two, subsidies or not. And number two, there's no form of energy, electrical energy production in the United States that's not subsidized. So, I'm not sure how you can use that as an argument. Solar can be unsightly. Yes, it can. But there are ways around that. I won't go into detail about them. Intermittent or unreliable. Yeah, that's true. But BESS is what we are using to address this concern, battery energy storage. And there's a need for coordinated grid upgrades. One of the things that Texas did, I'm going to digress for 2 seconds, when it realized that it needed to deploy clean and inexpensive energy, is it created grid connections that were easy for these wind and solar farms to actually connect to. One of the reasons that you see a lot of the developers trying to put large wind farms and large solar farms in certain areas is because if there's no major grid connection to the right type of transmission line in the area, they can't connect. So they have to find a place where there is that connection. And that's not always the best place for a community. So some of the upgrades we need to make to our grid are to provide connections in places where our communities can thrive with these large installations going in, and that they won't be interfered with by them. Okay. We'll see a lot of different ways how solar and BESS address the affordability. In one of the big ones is that these developers of battery storage systems are the ones who actually pay for the battery storage system to go in, and then they charge for the energy. Whereas the developers of power plants generally charge the ratepayer for the power plant, and that's a huge source of possible affordability improvement if we allow these things. And the same is true for some of the renewables. Also, the grid, or during these peak periods at the head of the duct, if I may say, when that's operating, the grid is stretched to its limit also in terms of how much power can be pumped through those lines. But if you take battery backup storage and put it right where it needs to be sent out to the community, right, deployed, close by to the community, the grid now can power those batteries when those lines are not stressed. It can fill those batteries up when there's no stress on the grid, and then the batteries deploy, and that allows us to not have to upgrade those lines at great expense to be able to take more power at peak demand times. Okay, that's a huge one. Most people don't really see that. And also, another one of the drivers for the clean energy and the storage is New York's Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. And this is an attempt on the part of New York State to address climate change and meet its goals of zero emission electricity by 2040, renewable energy by 2030, reduction in greenhouse gases emissions of 85% by 2050. I happen to think this is important, if not necessary. Not everybody does. I think you either buy into this or you don't. And so, for the purpose of this discussion, I'm just showing that as a driver. So let's talk about how this battery storage works and how we address the concerns, the appropriate rational concerns that people have over whether they are dangerous or not. And one of the things I'm going to be trying to put across to you is that we really have to be objective about this. We have to be smart, but we have to be objective. So just to quickly, so you understand when I'm talking about certain terms, we rate batteries with two numbers: wattage and watt hours. And so the wattage, for example, this little battery right here is a 5-watt battery. That means that we can put 5 watts into a load. But if there's a 10-watt load, let me go back, sorry. If there's a 10-watt load, we can't drive that load with this little 5-watt battery. It's not going to be able to do that. However, if the battery on the right is a 5-watt battery, we can drive that load with our 5-watt system, with a 5-watt battery. And we can make that little device work, that 5-watt device. The next rating is watt hours, and that is a measure of how long can we run that load for. So if we have a 25-watt-hour battery, we can run that 5-watt load for 5 hours. Everybody get that? That's basically, it's kind of simple, and it works for everything down from this little battery over here on the left to the big battery storage systems that we're going to talk about. And just to give you an idea of scale, over on the left, this is a cell phone. Cell phone works in 0.21 kilowatt hours, which is a tiny amount of electricity. But the next step up would be a power tool, which is at about 400 watt hours or 0.4 kilowatt hours. Kilowatts, 1,000 watt hours. Something that would be a battery backup for your house, the third one there, can average 5 to 15 kilowatt hours. But really aggressive systems can go as high as 80 kilowatt hours. And communities, we'll talk about this, are capping those at certain levels. So that's something to think about. The third is an electric vehicle. And that electric vehicles use between 40 and 200 kilowatt hours, depending on the size of the vehicle. So a smaller automobile type electric vehicle is going to use even in the 20 to 40 kilowatt hour battery range. I want to point something out to you as you look at this electric vehicle. When you look at this electric vehicle, you see an electric vehicle, right? But you're assuming that the charge from that vehicle is going from the charger into the car. Now, imagine that car sitting in a garage connected to that charger, but the power is flowing from the car into the house. What you're looking at there is not an electric vehicle, but a BESS. And as we go forward in time, you're going to see more and more electric vehicles doubling as battery backup systems for homes. There are also already vehicles out that can do this, and systems that can let your house modify to do that. Just something to think about. And then on the right, we've got utility scale battery backup systems and industrial scale battery backup systems that can be 500 kilowatts and higher. How high can they go? We don't know. I was kind of astonished to see that the Ulster one is 250 megawatts. And to give you an idea of scale, the Warwick system, the famous Warwick system that caught fire, was 1.4 megawatts. And some of the systems that are going in around the country now are in the 200 and 300 megawatt scale size. Gigantic. The electrical code, the National Electrical Code, tries to divide them sort of into residential / commercial and then utility level, right? So on the left, you've got tier 1, they call it, and they define that as anything lower than 600 kilowatt hours. And that would be enough to run a large farm if you went all the way up to 600 kilowatt hours, or perhaps a strip mall shopping center or something like that. And on the right, we've got tier 2, which is your big stuff, which is what the utilities are deploying now. It's not a matter of if you're going to see these systems coming at you in your municipality. It's a matter of when. It's astonishing to see how quickly these are growing. In the United States, this is just a United States graph, and these graphs don't all agree in terms of how much. I think the actual numbers are much higher than what they're showing here, but you see the scale at how fast they're being deployed. China in 2025, of December of 2025, installed more battery systems in terms of gigawatt hours than the United States has in all of the country just in December of last year. So BESS deployment worldwide is up 53%. And these are the states that are leading the charge. California, and these are the states that control their own, decision making in terms of their grids. Texas even has its own grid that is, as I said, and why Texas is deploying very heavily is because they realize that their demands are not going to be met, and they don't want to see another day for the rest of their lives when electricity costs $1,000 a kilowatt hour. I'm not going to do this thought experiment because we really don't have time. But what I want to ask you to do is, as we move forward and look at the decisions that we will make in terms of the safety of these systems, which is, I know, is a big concern, is that we use data and be objective about it. Because, first of all, the media is not your friend in terms of giving you objective information about what's dangerous and what's not. For example, if you were to ask people on the street, which of these three types of vehicles is the most likely to catch fire? This is the answer you're going to get. They're going to tell you electric, then hybrid, and then combustion engine vehicle. And the reason is because when the electric one, if there's an electric vehicle fire somewhere in the community, it makes the evening news. But there are 170,000 combustion engine vehicle fires every year, many of which kill people. And those just don't make it to the news because we have already, basically put this under our belts as a necessary evil, right? Here's the reality, though. The most likely of the three types of vehicles to catch fire is the hybrid. And this is from data, so you can go look this up. And the reason it makes sense, right? Because both combustion sources are contained in that vehicle, both the lithium battery and the gas tank. The next likely one to catch fire is the combustion engine vehicle, and the least likely one is the EV. So when we look at what's happening with battery fires, whether they be electric vehicle fires or whether they be BESS fires, we should be looking at the data. And here's an interesting graph. This is a real graph. We can get you the source for this. And what it's showing you in that orange line is that when we first started putting utility scale battery systems in, it was kind of like the 1893 World's Fair. We didn't really realize that there were considerations we needed to take into account to keep these things safe. And a lot of them had incidents where they either caught fire or they ran into an overheat situation or something like that. So what you're seeing on the left is the amount of incidents that were going on. And what you're seeing in the blue on the bottom is the amount of BESS systems that were actually deployed in terms of gigawatts, and it was like hardly any. So the ones that were going in were having problems. Now, if we continue to see the same problems moving forward, what you would expect is that orange line is going to track upwards with the blue line, and the blue line is how many BESS systems are going in. And what's happening is, as more BESS systems go in, less fires per gigawatt actually happen. And the reason is that just like in the 1893 World Fair, we figured it out. We learned from those fires, and we learned a lot from the Warwick fires as well. We learned from those fires how to engineer these things so that they're safe. And it really is my opinion as a safety engineer that we have reached a point where, so nothing is actually completely safe. Any other form of energy that we might talk about that we need to meet our demand is going to exhibit a graph like this. And where is their graph now? I can tell you that the amount of people who die each year because of methane gas explosion or something associated with a petroleum type of a power plant is probably considerable. We can look that up. I think it's 7 to 10 people per year are killed by gas explosions, gas fires, and things like that. And by the way, there's never been a person killed in a BESS fire in the United States. There were 2 people killed in China about 8 years ago, and it was not a lithium fire. It was a weird thing that I can talk about it when we have time. So let's talk about what we did to make that graph go down, where the batteries are not catching fire. And you say, well, they're not catching fire. They caught fire 3 times in Warwick. I am going to talk about why that's an anomaly. Well, before we get to that, though, fire engineers have been hard at work on these things, and there's some principles that fire engineers, fire safety engineers, and electrical safety engineers use to ensure that a product that could catch fire or create a fire is safe, right? And here are the big 4. Number 1 is prevention. So you create a design that prevents the fire from occurring. And with lithium batteries, you don't want to get them too hot. So in the beginning, back in 1991, they would get too hot because they would overcharge. And we realized we had to learn how to do better circuits to keep them from overcharging. That is pretty much taken care of. They're very rare, even at the best level, very rare that an overcharging situation occurs because we know how to do this. A second is water ingress. So if you got batteries operating outside or in a vehicle or something like that, and water gets into the actual battery connections, it could cause a fire to start. And that is what happened in Warwick. But what's happening is, in terms of newer designs for all these BESS systems, water ingress is heavily tested prior to these systems going online. I mean, when I say heavily tested, they are really put through the ringer. And finally, fire-resistant installation, materials, ways of creating the enclosures so that they don't catch fire. The second is containment. So if something happens and something inside the unit catches fire, and we do this for everything from hair dryers to toasters to electric vehicles to everything else, if the outer enclosure of those circuits and those batteries is designed to not allow the fire to escape. And if the fire doesn't escape, it only harms the batteries themselves. And perhaps if it's an electric vehicle, the vehicle itself. But it doesn't, harm anything around it. And that's called containment. And you notice that those BESS systems are contained in rather robust metal containers. And there's a reason for that. It's to contain the fire. And in the case of the Warwick fires that we're familiar with, the fires were absolutely contained. And as a matter of fact, a second thing that they do is they build smaller segments and smaller containers inside. So if one segment of the BESS unit actually catches fire, it does not spread to the other segments in the same overall container. And that also was true in the Warwick fires. The third is suppression. And suppression means that maybe you have an automatic fire putting out methodology, a halon system or a water sprinkler system that you see in buildings and things like that. That is a problem in BESS systems because you can put a lithium fire out with water, but you have to worry about the fact that if you have a contained fire within a large BESS system where only one container has caught fire and you spray water on that, you may ignite the other compartments if you do that. So an automatic fire suppression system at this time is not recommended. And this is where a lot of people got nervous because in Warwick, they had to actually ride out the fire. Once it caught fire, the Warwick Fire Department sat and watched it. They knew it wasn't going to spread. The containers were contained. They were monitoring their air quality in the area, and that was comparable to a structure fire like a house or a restaurant. And there was nothing else they could do. Some of them were saying to the supervisor, hey, we're going to go home. There's not anything we can do about this. And when all that energy that's inside the battery is exhausted, the fire goes out. I do understand how this makes people uncomfortable, and it's appropriate that they be uncomfortable. There are ways to mitigate the fact that we cannot use fire suppression, and I'll touch on those. And the last is monitoring. We're watching these things now continuously. There's extensive monitoring required under the new requirements. And that once, if anything happens where temperatures begin to rise within the unit, something looks out of order or something like that, the responders and the operators of the system are contacted immediately, and things are put under control. I'm going to try to go through this fast. There's a new fire code that's been put into place that has all this new technology in it. It was done by fire marshals, people who really know what they're doing with regard to fire. They buy into it. They believe that the BESS systems are deployable on a commercial level if they meet these systems, these requirements, and so do I. So I'm going to skip forward now, talk a little bit about the Warwick fire, and then I'm going to talk about what communities should be doing. So the Warwick fire is a bit of an anomaly. It took place in a battery design that had not met the NFPA code because parts of it didn't exist at the time. And also it was something called a centipede system, which is a little different from is normally deployed. And we have found that centipede systems are challenging. So what should have probably had been done is they should have replaced that system right at the get-go. They chose not to do that. This is the developer themselves. And for some reason, the people who were greenlighting these systems also chose to allow it to go forward. And they were also supposed to have put in documentation on certifications of safety. They did not. They started up the units before there was a certificate of occupancy actually issued for them. I think this is all, in my opinion, this is all inappropriate operations. And so if what the mayor has been saying, what the town and what the village have been saying is true, I think what we had here was an abuse of the requirements. And one of the things that we know is true is that, first responders are supposed to be trained before the system is commissioned. And they scheduled the training for the first responders for 6 months after the batteries were actually turned on. I mean, to me, there's no excuse for that. So there were a lot of things that happened that absolutely shouldn't have happened. So, given that we understand that we need these systems, the systems are coming, and that they're going to be going in, what could we as community members who are concerned about safety and concerned about this technology, what can we do to make sure that we're doing everything right? Okay. And what Warwick is doing, I applaud Warwick because the supervisor is taking this very pragmatically, and they're creating a new zoning ordinance for batteries. Each community, as has control of its own zoning ordinances, and control even for utility scale battery systems has actually been transferred downward a little bit, allowing communities to have a strong say, even if it's a utility operating on its own property within the lines of the town. The town has a lot to say about what to do. There's a model law that you can all reference that suggests quite a bit, I think, in terms of minimum requirements for BESS systems. I think those minimum requirements in the model law are actually fantastic. But as a community, you have the right to impose stricter requirements. So at the state level and the federal level are the minimum requirements that no matter who puts a BESS system in, they have to meet. And those include the new UL and the new NFPA requirements for BESS safety and fire containment. And so those are extremely rigorous, but you can go further if you want. And there's some things that you can do. You cannot become less stringent than the state and federal codes, but you can impose more stringent requirements. One is that, you are the ones who control permitting in your towns. You can have different permitting regulations depending on what type of area is being proposed. So, for example, if it's a rural area and someone wants to put in a tier 2 BESS system that is a utility level BESS system, you can say, well, we're not going to allow those at all in the areas where there's residential, where there's small scale commercial and things like that. But we will allow them in areas that are zoned as industrial or zoned as a certain type of, not non-wetlands or, for example, landfills that have been capped and things like that. You can say, okay, here you put that thing here, but you can't put it there. And you can create different cutoffs as well for where you want. For example, in Warwick, they are creating a cutoff of maximum 1 megawatt hour per per system. Where they're just, if you want to put anything bigger than that in Warwick right now, you have got to come to the planning board and apply for a variance, and the entire town board is going to review it along with all the professionals that need to be involved. So it doesn't say you can't do it. It just says you have to come in and get a specific variance for that. And that's something you can do. Some towns are putting in setbacks for these. I think large setbacks for highly populated areas and things like that are okay. We've never seen a BESS fire spread past, a few feet from the actual BESS containment area. And some towns are putting in things like 1,000 feet as a setback for there. I think what that's doing is just their way of couching it as, we're not going to allow these things in our town. I wouldn't recommend that, but again, you do have that prerogative. In certain areas where it's an industrial zone, you might put a 300-foot setback, and a 300-foot setback is reasonable, I think. So again, it is really up to you. This is really important, commissioning and decommissioning. You have control over this. Commissioning has to happen only after it's been ascertained that all of the permitting has been done correctly, that all of the safety requirements have been met and certified, that all of the training that is needed, for example, for first responders and everything like that has already taken place. You don't turn this thing on until we see all that. That did not happen in Warwick. It needs to happen everywhere, every day from now on. So those are controls that you actually have. This is not going to go into the logistics of it. You can review these slides at your leisure. But this is, for example, different zone districts designated different colors, and for those different zone districts, you'd have residential agriculture, residential planned business. You can create your own requirements. You don't want to shut out the commercial viability of BESS. A lot of these farmers who are using renewable energy to power their farms really need this to be viable. If they can install BESS systems on their property, if you throw them a 1,000-foot setback, it's going to knock them out of the game. They're not going to be able to put that battery backup in, and they are going to need it. So I don't think there's a good rationale, given the track record of those systems, to do that. So you want to be careful and make sure that in the tier 1 stuff, that is the lower kilowatt hour stuff, that you're not really choking that off. That's my recommendation. The big stuff, be very careful and do it the right way, and you will be safe. There's an Environmental Review Quality Act that kicks in on the utility scale BESS systems that requires that the project be subject to a full investigation of how this property will be affected in terms of local species, endangered species, how it will impact agriculture and wildlife and all that kind of stuff. So this is part of the whole handbook and part of the whole process. And finally, decommissioning. We get a lot of people saying, well, what happens to these solar panels out in the farmland 20 years from now when they're all rusted out and falling apart? Well, the community has control over that. The community can require escrow money for decommissioning. And what it basically does is it's a contract that requires the developer, who is also maintaining the site, to say that at end of life that they're going to come and take it away and leave the site the way it was before it was put up. And they have to set aside money for that, and they have to set aside a way for that to happen, even if they go out of business. So there have to be contingencies for that company to do that. And the same is true for BESS. So batteries don't last forever. They may last 5, 10, actually, no, that lasts much longer than 5. They may last 10, 15, 20, 25 years. But after that, either they have to be refurbished and upgraded or they have to be taken away. And I would be very, very clear about that in your laws and requirements. Um, and here's my last slide. I know I went over time, but the communities can take the lead. Uh, you need transparency. We had that problem in Warwick. We did not get transparency from the developer. And there were all kinds of extenuating circumstances around that. Be very careful not and to make sure that you have a pipeline into everyone that needs to be spoken to, but in the company that's doing this. Set your standard based on objectivity. You know, putting in 1,000-foot setback for a type of device that has never put fire out more than 10 feet away from the device is not an objective way to look at this. But there are objective things that need to be applied, and I hope that you'll do it in an objective way. Use your community engagement. Make sure your community members are involved in understanding all of this and helping you create the zoning codes, understanding what community members are comfortable with in terms of setbacks in different zoning codes. If you need these things to be far away from any school, write it into your code. And understand the landscape of developers and build relationships with them. It's not good for a developer to put in a unit that is going to harm your community. I'm sure that the company that put in the Warwick BESS systems are never going to do business in Warwick again. So it's in their best interest to give you a safe working system as well. So work with them and then understand the benefits. So I'm sorry that was a lot of fast talking, but that's it. And I will be happy to take questions if anybody wants to stick around. We get into the chat.
Yeah. The biggest question I saw repeated in the chat was demand for energy, and do we know how much of it is data centers? And I did put a couple articles in that indicate they are a major part of it.
Yeah, I think that, my personal feeling about the data centers is that they should be required by law to provide their own energy.
Yeah,
I
and
don't
that
even,
actually the Public Service Commission is working, there's a proceeding going on right now to explore how that could work. So that was encouraging to learn, and I put that in the
yes,
chat.
yes, I think, overall, the public's going to really put their foot down once they understand how much. And the other problem with data centers is their water usage. Also, I think they should be required to provide a way to make sure that they are not going to bleed a town dry of its water as well. And then after that, electrification of things, but that's going to happen. So, any one of these things on its own, we would probably be able to deal with a lot more easily than the three of them hitting us as a perfect storm, but the three of them are hitting us.
Greg, there's a question in the chat that says, how do you see electric school bus transition happening with solar and stationary batteries in conjunction with them?
Yeah. Uh, this is only my personal opinion. So my personal opinion is that we should not force this on communities, and that the transition of vehicles from internal combustion engine to electric, I believe in 50 years is not going to be a discussion item anymore. There won't be any more internal combustion engine vehicles. And we can have a whole nother seminar on why I think that. So I don't really see the need to make a community switch its school buses over. One of the problems with these buses is that they're heavy. They're heavier than the normal school buses, and this is true for all electric vehicles. And not every community's roads are set up at roads, bridges, crossways, and things like that are set up to handle a large number of heavier vehicles that was not anticipated before. So I think that we should do better at helping that transition happen without, doing it at gunpoint. That's my personal opinion.
And then there's another question that just came in. What size BESS is needed to provide backup power for a community of 5,000 people for 24 to 48 hours?
Well, I'd have to actually, do calculations on that. BESS systems are generally not deployed to 24 for 48 hours. Most of the BESS systems that you see going in, the ones that I've showed pictures of, are rated for 4 hours discharge. So what's happening is those systems are being designed to take over at the head of the duck curve. And that is usually from 6 p.m. to midnight. So those batteries are charged up during the day. It takes them, a good portion of the day to charge up. And then at 6 o'clock, they're turned on, and at midnight, they're turned off. They're out. So as far as, providing backup power for 24 to 48 hours, that's not the intention of these systems.
I will say there is being research, development and research being done into long duration battery
Mm,
energy storage systems, but they're kind of at the more beginning stages of that. California is starting to have some uh, long duration battery storage systems be built to do testing to see how they actually work and operate in practice and how long they can go for. So it's at the more beginning stages of deployment and
yep.
research into long duration battery storage. Um, and the other part too is that virtual power plants are also becoming a thing in some communities as well, and that can help provide backup power as well, which
Okay.
yeah,
Mhm.
virtual power plants are slightly different, but they have batteries deployed in people's homes that come online. And EVs can provide as also a backup battery system for individual households.
And
Yep.
the costs of home scale battery storage systems are falling fast.
They are. I just got mine and I have been waiting. I wanted one 5 years ago and it just wasn't cost effective, but I got mine this year and I'm very happy with it. Someone's asking about the sodium batteries. I'll take a quick shot at the sodium batteries. Um, the sodium batteries, well, I wouldn't call them safer, but they are definitely less likely to catch fire if they are subject to some sort of ignition source. Um, And they're also probably going to be a lot cheaper because there's lots of sodium everywhere. And we can mine that sodium wherever we need to. So I think the sodium battery, the only issue right now is number one, they haven't actually been deployed that much, but once people start to realize they're available, they're going to start proliferating. So we don't have the economy of scale on those yet. But the other thing is that they're heavier than lithium batteries right now. Maybe that technology will improve. Um, but you don't want to, you can't put them in a car or a truck at this point, but at some point you might be able to. But they are perfectly suitable for utility scale BESS.
Are there any other questions that people have? Oh, here's another one that just came in.
Or any place, host community.
So, are there any places getting host community benefit payments money for hosting BESS systems based on providing a benefit for the larger region? So, BESS systems, similarly to solar and wind, are subject to providing either pilot agreements or host agreements. It depends on how the municipality negotiates that agreement with the developer. Um, and the amount that they like you can get from developers depends on a whole bunch of different factors that I don't know as much about what factors involve that process, but I do know that municipalities can get host agreements and pilot agreements. Somebody also asked, and I think this is a Melissa question, are you available to present and take questions from town boards who are considering whether to allow battery storage systems?
Oh, no, this is
Absolutely.
Vicky from Nyack, right?
Absolutely.
Yay.
Absolutely. I don't take any money. I'll be happy to come. And I like to drive around New York. So call me.
Okay, and then we just had another question. Will Tier 1 batteries for residential use going to be all UL products that don't need any permitting or local code?
They will be UL products. Whether or not they need permitting, I think it's already built into most codes that they would need permitting. I had to get a permit to put mine in, even though the town, barely knew what they were. But local codes will be the at the discretion of the municipality.
Does anybody else have any questions? Feel free to either raise your hand or drop them in the chat.
Thanks, everybody.
We welcome your feedback. We really wanted this to be like zero sales and lots of seeing it from a lot of angles. And, I think any way that we can be supportive of what's going on at your local communities, we are down with that.
Yes, if you have any questions, if you would like to reach out to us, if you have any feedback, I'm dropping my email in the chat. Please feel free to reach out to me. I will send any feedback, any questions, anything of the sort. I'll send that to Melissa and Greg as well, but my email is in the chat if anybody would like to reach out to me. And I will be reaching out on Monday, sending out the presentation as well as the slides and also the recording.
Yeah, and we'll
So
post them on our website too.
yes.
Sweet.
Any last questions? Okay. I don't see any coming in.
Okay, great.
Okay. Lots
Thanks,
of
everybody.
lots of happy people.
It looks like it.
Great. Thanks to everybody for being part of our pilot delivery session.
Yes. Thank you all. Have a good rest of your evening.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Greg. That was really interesting.
Thank you.